At precisely 3:47 p.m., the conference room door clicked shut behind me, sealing in the stale air of recycled coffee breath and unspoken dread. I sat across from Karen, the HR director, her manicured nails tapping a rhythm on the polished oak table that sounded like a countdown. In her hand was a crisp folder, labeled with my name in stark black ink, Rebecca Hayes. She slid it toward me without a word, her eyes avoiding mine, as if eye contact might make this personal. "We're realigning your role with the company's evolving needs," she said. Her voice flat, rehearsed, effective immediately. No preamble. No soft landing, just the blade dropping clean. I didn't flinch. I'd seen the signs for weeks. The hushed meetings in glass-walled offices. The sudden vanishings of colleagues' desks, stripped bare overnight like they'd never existed. But this was my turn in the chute. I opened the folder slowly, letting the pages fan out under my fingers. The termination notice was on top. A single sheet dense with legalese, peppered with phrases like cultural fit concerns and behavioral inconsistencies. Vague, slippery words that could mean anything or nothing, designed to evade real accountability. Below it sat the NDA and release form. The real meat of the matter. The document that would supposedly tie my hands, silence my voice, and send me packing with the bare minimum. I scanned it methodically, my pulse steady, even as a quiet heat built in my chest. Page after page of boilerplate. Non-disclosure. Non-disparagement. Return of assets. Standard fare. Or so they'd want me to think. But then I hit page 7. Clause 5. There it was. A subtle rewrite. The kind that slips by if you're not looking for it. They'd altered the termination classification, softening it to mutual separation, while cross-referencing an old exit code that triggered full severance protocols. It didn't match. The language was inconsistent. A patchwork job, probably rushed through by someone who thought speed trumped scrutiny. I felt a flicker of something sharp and satisfying ignite inside me. This wasn't just a firing, it was a gift wrapped in their own incompetence. Karen cleared her throat, pushing a pen across the table. "If you'll just sign here, we can wrap this up." Her smile was thin, obligatory, the kind that masks impatience. I picked up the pen, letting the moment stretch, the silence thickening like fog. My mind raced back to how I'd gotten here, to the years I'd poured into Vertex Tech, a mid-sized software firm in Seattle where innovation was the buzzword but loyalty was disposable. I'd started as a compliance analyst fresh out of UW, climbing the ranks by spotting the cracks others ignored, the metadata mismatches in contracts, the buried clauses in vendor agreements that could sink ships. I'd saved them millions in potential lawsuits, rewritten their whistleblower policies to bulletproof levels. But lately, the air had turned toxic. Budget cuts whispered through the halls, executives padding their bonuses while streamlining the ranks. First went Mike, from engineering, a veteran coder deemed not adaptable. Then Laura in sales, labeled disruptive after questioning quotas. Each exit memo colder than the last, laced with euphemisms that hid the truth. They were culling anyone who didn't bend. Signing that NDA felt like sealing a pact with the devil. But I did it deliberately, my signature looping neatly across the line. As the ink dried, I pulled out my phone under the table's edge, snapping a discreet photo of Clause 5, not the whole document, just that damning section, the flash muted by my palm. Karen's eyes flicked down, but she said nothing, probably assuming it was nerves or habit. I stood, folding my copy into my bag. "Is that all?" I asked, my voice even, betraying nothing of the storm brewing beneath. She nodded, already glancing at her watch. "Security will escort you out." And just like that, I was walking the gauntlet of sympathetic stares from the open-plan floor. My badge surrendered at the door, the elevator descending like a final curtain. But as the doors parted to the lobby, I felt no defeat, only the slow burn of anticipation. They'd handed me the key to their undoing without even knowing it. That night, alone in my Capitol Hill apartment, rain pattering against the window like impatient fingers, I spread the documents across my kitchen table. The NDA's flaw glared back at me under the harsh LED light. Clause 5 referenced exit code 12B, which, per the employee handbook I'd helped update 3 years ago, entitled me to 6 months severance, continued health coverage, and accelerated vesting of my stock options, worth north of $150,000 at current market rates. But the rewritten language tried to frame it as voluntary resignation, which would void all that. The mismatch was blatant, a legal loose thread begging to be pulled. I cross-checked against my personal archive, every contract revision, every policy memo I'd saved over the years, time-stamped and backed up. There it was, the original codebook, untouched in the cloud drive they'd never revoked my access to. Their haste had left fingerprints everywhere. I didn't sleep much that night. Instead, I drafted an email to my old mentor, a sharp-eyed attorney at a downtown firm. No drama, just facts, attached scans, highlighted discrepancies, a quiet query about next steps. By dawn, as the city stirred below, I hit send. The response came before my first coffee. This is gold. Becca. Sloppy work on their end. We can leverage this. The words settled over me like a warm blanket, easing the knot in my gut. But it wasn't vengeance I craved, not yet. It was justice. The kind that unfolds quietly, inexorably, like a tide pulling back before the crash. The days blurred into a tense waiting game. Vertex's offices loomed in my mind, a glass monolith reflecting the Puget Sound's gray skies. I'd given them a decade, only to be discarded like outdated code. But now, armed with their error, I felt the power shift. Phone calls trickled in, first from Karen, her tone edged with forced civility, asking if I'd reviewed the terms thoroughly. I played coy, confirming nothing. Then came the late-night ping from an unknown number, a voice I recognized as the company's general counsel, probing if I'd noticed any irregularities. I let the pauses linger, my responses measured, planting seeds of doubt without revealing my hand. Each interaction built the pressure, a slow damming of the river until the floodgates strained. By week's end, the first crack appeared, an email from finance, CCing HR, acknowledging a processing adjustment to my final paycheck. No details, just a vague promise of updated calculations. I smiled into the screen, the glow illuminating my face in the dim room. They'd spotted it, or feared I had. But it was too late. The clause they'd botched wasn't just a typo, it was a gateway to everything they'd tried to withhold. And as I archived the message, adding it to my growing dossier, I whispered to the empty apartment, "Checkmate begins." The envelope arrived on a crisp Monday morning, postmarked from Vertex's headquarters, its weight heavier than expected. I sliced it open at my kitchen counter. The Seattle skyline muted through the fog outside. Inside was a check, severance, but only the base amount, skimpy and insulting, paired with a curt letter reiterating the mutual terms. No mention of the stock, the benefits, the full package Clause 5 entitled me to. It was their opening gambit, a test to see if I'd bite or bark. I set it aside, untouched, and reached for my phone instead. My attorney, Elena, picked up on the second ring. "They lowballed you," she said after I read her the letter. "Classic move. But we've got the leverage. Send them the notice." The notice was a politely worded demand, Drafted over the weekend. A breakdown of the NDA's inconsistencies. Citations to the codebook. And a calm request for full compliance. No threats. Just facts laid bare like cards on the table. I hit send at 10:15 a.m., copying Elena for the record. The email vanished into the ether. But I could almost hear the ripple it caused across town, the hurried whispers in executive suites, the frantic scrolling through digital archives. By noon, my inbox lit up, a response from the council. Robert. Proposing a clarification call. I agreed, but on my terms, video off, recorded for my records. When the line connected, his voice was smoother than before, laced with that faux camaraderie lawyers deploy like armor. Rebecca, we appreciate you flagging this. Must have been an oversight in drafting. Oversight. The word hung there, a flimsy shield against the truth. I let it dangle, my silence forcing him to fill it. He rambled on about good faith adjustments, offering a bump in severance, but skirting the equity. We can make this amicable, he concluded. Amicable. As if this were a friendly divorce. Not a calculated purge. Memories flooded back, the late nights I'd spent fortifying Vertex's compliance framework, catching fraud in supplier contracts that could have tanked their IPO dreams. I'd been their guardian, only to be labeled a liability when profits tightened. The anger simmered now, a low boil, but I kept my tone cool. The clause speaks for itself. Robert. Code 12B is clear. A pause on his end, paper shuffling. Then, a concession. We'll review internally. The call ended abruptly, leaving me staring at my reflection in the darkened screen, eyes steady, jaw set. The damning continued, pressure mounting behind the walls they'd built. That afternoon, I walked along the waterfront, the salt air clearing my head as gulls cried overhead. It wasn't just about the money, it was the principle, the quiet erosion of trust in places where people spent their lives. Vertex preached team first, but when push came to shove, it was every exec for themselves. I'd seen it in the eyes of those let go before me, the shock, the betrayal etching lines into faces overnight. Now, it was my story unfolding, but with a twist they hadn't scripted. By evening, another email, finance looping in, attaching revised calculations. The number had doubled, but still no stock vesting. Close, but not enough.
Elena adviset patience.
They're testing boundaries. Hold firm. The next day brought escalation. Karen called personally, her voice cracking slightly under the polish. Becca, this doesn't have to drag out. We're prepared to settle generously. Generous. The word twisted in my gut. A reminder of how they'd undervalued me for years. I recalled the promotion I'd been promised. Dangled then yanked when a cheaper hire appeared. The muzzled frustrations. The swallowed pride. Generous would be honoring the document you drafted, I replied softly. She sighed, the sound heavy with resignation. We'll get back to you. Click. The tension coiled tighter. Each exchange a turn of the screw. Midweek. The breakthrough cracked open. An overnight courier delivered a thick packet, amended NDA with corrections. A full payout breakdown including equity at market value, $187,000 total, and a nondescript release form absolving them of further claims. But buried in the fine print was a new clause, a gag order extending beyond standard non-disparagement, barring any indirect commentary on company practices. Sneaky. Elena spotted it immediately. They're scared. This is hush money disguised as compliance. We countered with a red line, striking the addition, demanding clean terms. The back and forth intensified, emails flying like arrows in the dark. By Friday, exhaustion crept in, but so did a fierce resolve. I'd transformed from discarded employee to unintended adversary, all because of one flawed clause. As I paced my living room, the city lights twinkling below, I felt the bloat of anticipation, the dam nearing its limit. Robert's final email arrived at dusk. Agreed to revisions. Funds transferring Monday.
No apologies.
Just capitulation. I exhaled slowly, the weight lifting fractionally. But the storm wasn't over. It was gathering force for the reveal. Monday dawned gray and relentless, the kind of Seattle weather that mirrors inner turmoil. I logged into my bank app at 8:01 a.m., watching the balance tick upward as the wire hit severance, benefits extension, and the equity lump sum. Every penny accounted for per code 12B. It wasn't triumph that washed over me, but a quiet vindication, cool and steady like the rain streaking the windows. Vertex had blinked, their sloppiness costing them dearly. But the real payoff came later that afternoon. An internal memo leaked by a former colleague, forwarded anonymously to my burner email. Q3 adjustments, enhanced document review protocols. Buried in the jargon was the truth, mandatory legal sign-offs on all exit paperwork. Version locking enabled across drives. My clause had sparked an overhaul, a silent admission of fault. I didn't celebrate. Instead, I met Elena for coffee at a quiet spot near Pike Place, the aroma of fresh grounds grounding us amid the chatter. You played it perfectly, she said, clinking mugs.
No noise.
Just results. But beneath her praise lingered the what-ifs, the careers derailed by similar tactics, the lives upended without recourse. It gnawed at me, that broader injustice. Vertex wasn't unique. Corporate America thrived on such maneuvers, chewing up the diligent and spitting out the inconvenient. I'd beaten the game this time. But how many hadn't? The calls kept coming. Sutler now, a recruiter from a rival firm, hinting at Vertex's reputation dip in industry circles. Whispers of boardroom fallout, Karen's sudden leave of absence, Robert's tightened oversight. Their empire, built on code and cunning, now cracked by a single unchecked edit. I archived it all, my digital fortress growing, a testament to patience over panic. Evenings stretched long, filled with reflection, the early days at Vertex, buzzing with promise, the gradual souring as greed eclipsed growth. I'd been loyal, perhaps too much, blinding myself to the rot. Then came the unexpected pivot. A week post-payout, Gavin, the CEO himself, emailed directly, no intermediaries. Subject line: open dialogue. He proposed a consulting arrangement, off books, to leverage my expertise in compliance. The offer was plush, quarterly retainers, remote flexibility. But the subtext screamed, by my silence. Bury the blunder. I stared at the screen, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat. Memories surged, the all-hands meetings where he'd preached integrity, only to orchestrate purges behind closed doors. The hypocrisy fueled a slow-burning rage, damming up until it threatened to spill. I replied succinctly, appreciate the consideration, but I'll pass.
No elaboration.
Just closure. His response was swift, edged with urgency. Reconsider. This could be mutually beneficial. Mutually. The word echoed hollowly. I forwarded it to Elena, who laughed over the line. They're desperate. Words getting out. Indeed. LinkedIn buzzed with subtle posts, ex-employees venting veiled frustrations, tagging Vertex in lessons learned. My story, anonymized, rippled through networks.
A cautionary tale gaining traction.
The pressure peaked that Friday night. Alone with a glass of wine, overlooking the fairy lights on the Sound, I felt the emotional crest. It wasn't just my win, it was a proxy for every overlooked worker, every hushed exit, Tears came unbidden, hot and cathartic, releasing the pent-up strain. I'd held firm, turned their weapon against them. But at what cost? The isolation of battle, the erosion of trust. Yet, in that vulnerability, resolve hardened. The dam held, but the flood was imminent, not destruction, but revelation. The investor report surfaced mid-month. A glossy PDF buried in Vertex's filings, flagged by Elena's alert system. I downloaded it in my home office, the screen's glow casting shadows across the room. Front-loaded with optimistic projections. It masked the sting in the appendices. One-off settlement expenses related to personnel transitions, $204,500. No names, no narratives, just the cold arithmetic of their mistake. Clause 5 had extracted its toll. A financial scar on their balance sheet. I saved it to my archive. The file joining ranks with timestamps and trails. A digital monument to meticulousness. Word spread quietly in industry happy hours. Whispers of Vertex's HR hiccup eroding their shine. Recruiters cooled on their postings. Stock dipped fractionally amid murmurs. Karen's LinkedIn went dark. Her profile scrubbed of affiliations, a quiet exile. Robert soldiered on. But sources hinted at clipped wings. Gavin's emails ceased. Replaced by radio silence. The executive bubble pierced. I'd become the ghost in their machine. Unseen but felt. Reflection turned inward. Why me? Not luck. But habit, the compulsion to document, to question. Born from a childhood watching my parents navigate blue-collar layoffs. Fighting for every scrap. Vertex had underestimated that fire. Seeing only a compliant cog.
Now,
Empowered, I knew horizons. Consulting gigs from sympathetic firms. Offers pouring in via back channels. But the victory tasted bittersweet. Laced with the knowledge of systemic flaws. How many clauses went unnoticed? How many lives unraveled? A month on, the emotional undercurrent swelled. I volunteered at a workers' rights clinic, sharing anonymized insights, eyes widening at parallels. One story mirrored mine, a fired admin spotting contract gaps, turning tables. It fueled a quiet mission, the dam's pressure redirecting into purpose. Late nights, I drafted guides, simple checklists for employees. Empowering the vulnerable. No fanfare, just ripples. Then, the climax crested unexpectedly. An anonymous tip led to a journalist's query. Heard about Vertex's exit fumbles. Care to comment? I paused. Heart pounding.
Elena adviset caution.
But the urge built, a controlled release. Off record. I shared facts. No names. The article dropped days later. Tech firm's costly compliance slip, detailing patterns without specifics. Vertex issued a bland statement, committed to best practices. But the damage compounded. Shares sliding further. In the quiet aftermath, I stood on my balcony, wind whipping off the water. The bloat released. Not in destruction, but transformation. I'd exposed the fragility of corporate armor. All from one flawed clause. The city hummed below. Indifferent, but I felt anchored. The storm passed. Months blurred into a new rhythm. The payout cushioning my pivot to independence. Vertex faded into rear view. Their glass tower a distant silhouette against the horizon. But echoes lingered. The what-ifs. The moral quandaries. Had I gone too far? Or not far enough? The clause's legacy wasn't just financial, it was a mirror to power's abuse. Reminder that vigilance levels fields. Connections deepened. Former colleagues reached out, sharing war stories over virtual coffees. A network forged in shared scars. One, a young engineer, credited my ripple for negotiating better terms pre-exit. It warmed the lingering chill. turning isolation into community. Elena became a confidant, our talks veering from legal to philosophical, how systems devour the diligent, how one voice disrupts. Yet, doubt crept in quiet moments. Was this justice? Or petty revenge? The money sat invested, untouched, a symbol more than spend. I channeled it. Donations to labor advocacy, pro bono consults for underpaid workers. Purpose eclipsed pain, the narrative rewriting itself. A year later, at a tech conference, I spotted Gavin across the room, grayer, subdued. Our eyes met. He nodded curtly, averting gaze. No words needed, the clause spoke volumes. Back home, rain drumming familiarly. I reviewed my archive one last time, files pristine, a testament to resilience. Closing the folder, I whispered to the void. What if everyone checked the fine print? The question hung, unanswered. A lingering ethic, in a world of disposable loyalties. Who guards the guardians? The story ends not with closure, but contemplation. Did one woman's stand shift the tide, or merely ripple the surface? You decide.